after art school, and I graduated in 1967, I went to Manhattan and became involved with as one of the pioneer members of the group called the Videofreex, and we were.
Can you explain a bit more about who the Videofreex were?
Yeah, we were a group initially of just 3 of us, and 2 of the members had met at Woodstock, and then my boyfriend, or old man as we used to say, came back to Manhattan, and I had seen coverage on CBS or one of the big stations about Woodstock, and I said, David, were you at Woodstock? And he said, yes, of course I was at Woodstock. And I know I would have been there had I not been visiting my grandfather in Michigan at the time. And he said, and I met this young man named Harry Teasdale, and by the way, he's going to come and live with us. I said, oh, really? It was my loft, and all of a sudden I was being invaded, not only by video equipment, by other people. Anyway, he turned out to be this wonderful young guy, and he had a video camera, and David had one, and they met at Woodstock, and they started documenting what was going on behind the stage, none of the music, but with all the people that were basically stoned out of their minds. And that was, then they would show, but the most important thing was they had a closed circuit television system where they set up a monitor, they would shoot something, and then they would play it back immediately. And so people were able to see themselves on television, and that was something nobody in 1969 had done before. They just never had seen themselves, because at that point there was only ABC, NBC, and CBS. Those are the only 3 network television stations that existed at that time, and everything was scripted. You didn't go on camera unless you had a script that you were reading. So we decided to take these video cameras and run around Manhattan and document what was going on in the music and the streets and the demonstrations, and we just started, making lots of video tapes with these little Sony Portapacks that were about this big. They didn't have a sound equipment, so you had to tape a microphone on top with a piece of gaffer's tape, and you had to carry a deck, which was a 20-minute reel-to-reel deck, and it was kind of heavy. But I decided, I was trying to make sculpture, but as this equipment started coming into the loft on Rivington Street, I thought, well, if you can't fight them, join them. So I picked up a video camera, and I had a camera in my hands my whole life, one way it's still cameras, but I was used to looking through a lens and taking photographs. The only difference was this was a moving image rather than a still image. So I basically stayed behind the camera for about 3 years, and we got a connection with CBS, and the assistant to the president of CBS wanted to make a documentary of the Avantgarde movement of the late 60s. And so David said, well, we can't do this by ourselves. And so we started hiring people. And in the end, there were 10 of us. It started with 3 and ended up being 10. It became a collective. And we all lived together. We had an allowance of $25 a week. And so...
Mary Curtis, can you tell us a bit more about this avant-garde movement in the 60s for a global audience? Just what it was and why there was a movement.
Yeah, what it was it was all mixed up with the Vietnam War, a lot of it, because people our age were being drafted into the Vietnam War. Anybody our age that had a head on straight knew that the Vietnam War was something that was a bogus war. We should never have been there. It was a waste of money and time and lives. And we knew a lot of people who were trying to get out of it. They went to Canada, they starved themselves so they wouldn't weigh enough. They did all sorts of tricks to try to get out of the draft. So that the whole underlying vibration at that time was Vietnam. And every night there was all these terrible, horrific newscasts about what was going on there, and we all knew that it was we should never have been there. The French knew that. The French got out, and then we came in for some dumb reason, and it was terrible because our friends were having to go to Vietnam, and so that was one thing that was happening. Another thing was happening. There was a lot of music, really outlandish kind of music. There was dance. There was Hubby Burgess had a whole circus group that was doing illegal circus juggling in Central Park. We got that on tape. Why
was juggling illegal?
Because they didn't have a permit, for gosh sake. It's you got to have a permit to do everything. And so we would hear about something, we would grab the equipment and we'd go out and shoot it. Now, there were 4 women and 6 men. Looking back on it, we realized there wasn't a lot of sexism, although this was before the women's movement, because nobody knew what they were doing, really. So if you were interested in shooting something, you would just do it and see how well you could do it. We did have one technical person, Chuck Kennedy, that we lured away from his straight job, and he became our techie. So he knew how these systems worked on a technical basis. And then Perry Teasdale learned a lot about it, and so did Skip Blumberg. And my boyfriend, David Court, knew a bit about it as well. David was kind of the spark plug behind this whole thing. He was a very charismatic person. And if anybody's interested in this, there's a fabulous documentary called Here Come the Videofreex. And you can Google it and Here Come the Videofreex.film, and you can see it on your computer. Now, it was a wild time. There were happenings, there were art openings, there were dance performances, and so we would just hear about something and we would grab the equipment and we would go out and shoot it. And so CBS, this person, Don West, found out about us and wanted to hire us, and he did. He hired us, and for about 4 or 5 months, we spent a lot of money. We went all over the country, and we went to Chicago and talked to Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin. My boyfriend David Court had gone to school with Abby Hoffman at Brandeis, and so there was a way to get into the headquarters there.
Can you tell us who Abby Hoffman is? Abby
Hoffman was the head of the Yippie movement, and he was very revolutionary. And
what was the Yippie movement?
Well, it was one of these. I'm not very good at. I wish Peter were here because he could tell you exactly what they. Although he wasn't there at the time, but it was a revolutionary movement. They had been busted in Chicago at the Chicago Convention and thrown in jail. There's a film about this, and there were 7 of them on trial in Chicago, and they were in Chicago, and they had been there the year before, and they had been arrested during the convention, the Republican convention, and so this was the trial to see whether they were going to be thrown in jail or not, and they weren't, but they were there in order, because the trial, it took about a year to get the trial underway, and so we went to Chicago to talk to Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin,